Thank you all for joining us today. And today we have Daniel Marsden, who is now currently a LMPD officer, but he moved to the United States when he was 16, and he had quite the adventure then, which I'm sure he'll tell us about. And then, you know, he was playing basketball, but then there was an injury, and so he decided that God was pointing him towards something different in life, and he started a program in New Albany to reach out to marginalized youth called Redeem the Dream. And now he works with the LMPD, and he's passionate about fighting human trafficking. So he's going to tell us more about his story, and we're really glad that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll just let you.
All right. Thank you guys so much for letting me show up here and speak to you guys about my book. So I'm just going to talk a little bit how the book came about, and then maybe share a few stories and answer some questions. And so, as you kind of mentioned, I have a little bit of a different kind of story. I grew up in Germany, born and raised, and when I was 16, I took a one-way ticket and came to the U.S. and was left at the airport when I first arrived. And so I have this kind of crazy story, and throughout the years, people from all over the world, everywhere I went, would say, man, you gotta write this down. And so I figured, hey, maybe I need to start writing. And so fast forward years later, when I had my nonprofit prior to being with LMPD, one of my really good friends who has a statement up front on my book on the cover, Ruthie Bolton, she won 2 Olympic gold medals with the USA women's basketball team in '96 and in 2000. Just one of the greatest people I ever met. She did a lot with our nonprofit, and one time we did a girls basketball camp at Floyd Central High School in New Albany, the area, and she turned to the parents and said, Dan's writing a book, you guys are gonna have to get it. And then she turned to me and said, oh, now you gotta write it. And so I was like, that's when I really kind of started writing a little bit, on and off. And then later on with LMPD, I had a really bad back injury that laid me out, and I wasn't even sure if I was gonna ever walk again. And it was miserable. But during that recovery phase, I was off work for like 6 to 8 months twice because of this back injury. And so that's when I finished writing. I was like, I can do this, you know? So I finished and took out a $10,000 business loan, just kind of bet on it, and just kind of created this book. And one of my favorite parts about the writing was really reconnecting with a lot of old friends that kind of helped me along my journey, just to make sure I recollect things, remember things the right way. One of my college friends was amazing. She read this whole transcript and wrote like a 14-page review on it before I had it edited professionally. She works at Pepperdine University out in California. It was a huge help, and so there's a lot of people that just helped throughout the process, and I can't believe I have this book now. So I'm super excited. So yeah, I'm gonna just tell a couple stories, I guess, you know, from this book. And also with the book, I have questions for personal reflection at the end of each chapter. So the whole purpose behind it, I hope it's a book about hope. You know, really the intention is hope, and kind of sharing my journey and processing my journey really helped me mentally and emotionally just write, really, you know, everything I've been through and stuff. And I'm just hoping it helps other people process their own story. That's why I put questions for reflection at the end of each chapter, and I got pictures in the middle and stuff. Even found a picture of me being at the airport in Düsseldorf, Germany in 1997 when I took that one-way ticket. So good stuff. But yeah, I'm just gonna share a little bit share my story. Some of the key parts. Well, I was born and raised Germany, like I said, and single mom on welfare kind of situation, government housing. My birth father was a U.S. citizen, so he was an American soldier stationed in Germany. They met at a bar. I came out of it. He left. He's dead now, drugs and alcohol. He never really was around. Never came to a single birthday. Nothing. Never paid a dime in child support. But the one thing he did give me was a U.S. citizenship. So I think, yeah, I think he's mine, you know, signed that piece of paper. It wasn't there when I was born, but because of that, I got a citizenship. And so when I was about 10 years old, I fell in love with basketball. I started playing soccer when I was younger, and then at 10, I started playing basketball. It was kind of my escape from everything. Thankful for it. Never really was the most talented in the world, but I just outworked people, I guess. I just never gave up, was dumb enough not to. And when I was 16, I kind of had a little bit of a break, and I played on a German basketball tour team. Half of us were German kids, and the other half was from Croatia. I don't know if you guys remember, back in the 90s, there was a big war in Yugoslavia, and tore that whole area apart. And now it's several different countries. So you got Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia and all these different places are their own little countries now. Well, when I was 15, 14, that's kind of when that war went on. And right after that, this American guy living in Germany, coaching kids basketball, decided to go to Croatia and pick a bunch of young players that survived the war and mix them with some German kids. And we toured throughout Oregon and California in the summer of '96 and played a bunch of high schools and just went up and down the West Coast. And it was an amazing opportunity for me. And every high school coach that I met at the time, it was like 8 coaches or so, I got their personal address. When I came back from my sophomore year of high school, I wrote them each a long letter, said, hey, I want to come to America, I want to come to America. And one guy writes me back. And so I'm like, clamoring onto him, and we stay in touch every couple of months. He's like, yeah, man, I'm going to find you a place to play. I'm going to find you a family to live with and a high school to go to, and it's all going to be great. And so I was like, awesome. I stayed in touch with him this whole time. I was 15 at the time. He never talked to my mom, so maybe he didn't really take me that serious, but we stayed in touch every few months. And, as my 10th grade year kind of came to an end, I was like, all right, you got my family set up where I'm going to go play at and live at. And he's like, well, you just buy your plane ticket and handle your part, and I'll handle my part. And so my bicycle randomly got stolen. In Germany, everything is insured, even bicycles. And so I got a little bit of insurance money back on my little bicycle, like $300 or something. And I scraped together a couple more pennies and bought a one-way ticket from Düsseldorf, Germany to Portland, Oregon for like $350 at the time. It was just one way, youth reduced, Turkish Airways. It's like the cheapest thing you can find. And so I called him up and said, hey, I got my plane ticket. I'm coming to America. I'm excited, And he's like, whoa. Wait a minute, like, I'm not your mom. Finding a family is something you gotta do on your own. Like, 2 weeks before I was gonna fly out and move to this country on my own with no family, and this whole year he was promising me how he's gonna find me a family and be there for me. And then after I got my plane ticket and he realized, holy cow, he's serious. Yeah, he never even talked to my mom. Looking back, I'm like, yeah, usually you want to talk to an adult, so, but, back then I was 15, I didn't think that way. And so he's like, well, there's this lady I work with. She might be interested in taking you. And she's got a family. This guy was a single dude living with his girlfriend at the time. He's like, well, this girl I work with, she's married. She's got a family. She might be a good contact for you. So he gives me this random number. I hang up and I cold call this lady and say, hey, my name is Danny Marsden. Like, I'm moving to America in a week. Can I live with you? So it's like, can't imagine getting a call like that, as an adult. And she's like, whoa, like she was taken aback. But she promised to pick me up from the airport. She's like, we'll be there in Portland and we'll pick you up. You can crash on our couch. And at the very least, we're going to figure out what the heck's going on. You're not going to be on the street. It's like, well, thank you very much. That's all I can ask for. I said, I know this is kind of weird. Do I need to remind you the day before I fly out? This is kind of like a week, a week before. It's like, oh, no, save your money. We'll be there. Well, long story short, it took me 27 hours from my little apartment in Germany to drive to the airport until I landed in Portland. From when I left my apartment to Portland, Oregon, was 27 hours of travel on my own at 16. And I only had a one-way ticket, a couple clothes, and maybe $200-300, not enough to fly back, for sure. And I show up in Portland, and she wasn't at the airport. And so I never met this person to this day. So they just left me at the airport. I tell people I never cussed and prayed that much at the same time. You walk around, bleep, 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 and like, God, please help me, So, it was crazy. And this was like the late 90s, so it was really before the cell phones and everything like that. And so I like to think I look young now, but like back then I looked like I was 12 when I was 17. And I was sitting in the corner for hours. It was late at night, and some airport personnel kind of noticed me by myself with no family. And she was like, well, where's your family at? And I was like, I don't know. Like, where are you supposed to stay tonight? I don't know. And like, well, do you want a calling card? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So they gave me a calling card, and once you scratch the number off, and you punch the numbers in on those, pay phones things. And so I called that lady who's supposed to pick me up, and she didn't answer her phone, of course. Shocking, right? And so I kept trying, couldn't get a hold of her. And then I called that coach I was in touch with that whole year that, basically bailed and gave me her number last minute. And of course he didn't answer his phone either. And those are all landlines, those aren't cell phones. And so I kept trying, and then finally this coach's girlfriend, who at the time I didn't even know who that was, answers the phone. And she's like, you're who? You're where? So she didn't even know who I was. So she's living with this coach who's talking to me for an entire year. He just hangs up the phone, doesn't even tell the person he's living with. He just promised this kid in Germany he's going to hook him up and help him with a place to live and everything. So she finds all this stuff out right then when I'm at the airport. And she's not happy about that, of course. And she comes and picks me up an hour or two later, drives me behind some factory in the middle of the night. Now it's maybe 2 a.m. in Portland. And she said there's going to be a black SUV. It's going to pull up here. And when this black SUV pulls up, you get out of my car, you get in that car, and they take you wherever you need to go, and that's it. And at that point, I was too tired to care, you know. Sure enough, black SUV pulls up. She said, get out of my car and get in that car. And jump in this random black SUV, and some random dude in there takes me in the middle of nowhere, some small town called Vernonia. It's about 43 miles northeast of Portland, like a tiny town, maybe less than 1,000 people. And outside of it is some outdoor summer kids camp owned by Larry Steele, who actually played at the University of Kentucky in the 60s or 70s, and then won an NBA championship in 77 or something in Portland, and kind of owns half of Portland now. But he's got that camp out there that he owns. So they dropped me off there in the middle of the night because the coach I was in touch with, he was working that camp, and his girlfriend just kind of organized for me to be dropped off at his feet, you know. And he was shocked that I actually showed up. And he said, "Oh, my buddy, he's my brother. He's the janitor here. You know, we'll talk to him in the morning." This is now, it's like 2, 3 a.m. And I'm sure he can get you some work. So I spent my first month in America, you know, basically being a servant to the kids that had the money to be at the camp, and picked up trash and mowed the grass and slept in some bunk bed somewhere and had no idea. And I was only going to be a junior in high school. And so then they're like, well, what are we going to do? You know, kind of have to finish school. And so Larry Steele owned the camp, connected me to some random people who lived in some small town on the Oregon coast, and it called Walport, which has only 1,600 people, small town on the Oregon coast. And they just drove me out there and brought me to the high school, and I kind of told my little story to the teachers and administrators, and they had no idea what to do with me, because this was really before Child Protective Services was a thing. That didn't really develop until the early 2000s. And so I just washed up there, and they're like, you're not an exchange student, you're broke, you're from Europe, like, what are we gonna do with you? Like, you know, nobody really had an idea what to do with me. And so the shop teacher was like, well, my oldest son just went off to college, I got an empty room, just move in with me. And so I moved in with the shop teacher at this high school and got a job at a grocery store and started my life in America. And I had no idea kind of what I was up against. And that's kind of when I really started realizing how easy it is to fall through the cracks, you know, anywhere, and, you know, here in America or anywhere in the world probably, but how easy it is to fall through the cracks even here when you don't have a support system. Like, when people feel like they can get over on you, they will get over on you. You know, it's just, I mean, that's why I'm so passionate about exploitation to the levels of human trafficking now, is because it really, all that is someone sees someone vulnerable and they take advantage of them, you know, for a profit at the end of the day. And so I experienced a lot of that because I didn't have that support system. And it was like effing German go home was almost like every other week out here somewhere. And when you're 16 and you don't have anybody to process that with, you know, that's kind of hard, you know. I figure even now when you have some kind of prejudice problems, you can probably go home and you have parents that, you know, maybe experience the same thing, or someone you can talk to. But I just had to like keep that inside, and there was like nobody I could process any of my experiences with. And so like 20 plus years later now, I'm trying to, you know, emotionally kind of figure out like what that looks like for me. You know, then you're just kind of in fight or flight mode at that time. And so my manager at my job didn't like me because I had a strong German accent, which is why now a lot of people don't realize I'm from somewhere else unless I get tired and I really start mixing up my V's and W's, which are the two things that Germans can never say. It took forever to learn how to say volleyball. We say volleyball because V's and W's, like it's like interchangeable. So that's one thing that's still hard. But anyway, you know, they poured chocolate pudding down my neck. My teammates did, told me to go back to my country, threw me against cars, and my coach told me I'll never play in college. That was my goal. I wanted to be a basketball player, so I came here, you know, and it would have been a lot easier just to stay in Germany looking back, you know, but my coach told me I'll never play in college, just try something I'm good at. I played 8 minutes my entire junior season, like the entire season, and it was probably the worst team in the state of Oregon at the time. We won one game the whole year. It was pretty embarrassing, right? And so my confidence just dropped dramatically, and that's when I just really kind of realized, man, it's tough when you fall through the cracks, you know, and people will take advantage of you. And so that's kind of how my journey started. And for the sake of time, I'm gonna kind of jump to a couple years forward now. So there's one significant incident there, and years passed, and I ended up at a small Christian university in California. At the time it was San Jose Christian College. Now it's called William Jessup University, and it's kind of grown. It's in Rockland, in Sacramento. It's a bigger university now, kind of really expensive and stuff. And I earned a 50% scholarship there, and played there for 4 years, from 2000 to 2004. Graduated with a degree in counseling and theology, 2 majors, 2 bachelor degrees. But even in institutions sometimes that are supposed to protect you, sometimes you can find they don't, and exploitation can happen. And I'm not hating on faith. I mean, I have faith. I'm a Christian, and it's important to me. But at the same time, I realize even in Christian institutions or institutions that are supposed to be safe, a lot of times people can be taken advantage of and exploited, like the foster care system or anywhere, that's supposed to be safe. And I had a situation like that was really life-changing at Jessup, and I write about that, and it really was hard to write about because I never spoke up about it, because I always felt like I shouldn't, but I did, because I feel like the truth is important, sometimes. And so the coach I played for, I lived with him my senior year of high school. So after that junior year, I talked about a lot of stuff happened, and I write about it for the sake of time. I'm skipping through it, but there's this high school coach, this small college coach that took me basically off the street, and I slept on his couch for my senior year of high school, and he really helped me and let me work out with his college team while I was in high school, and brought my confidence back up. And I walked on a junior college for a year, and then I played for him in San Jose for 4 years. And I thought because of what he did for me when I was in high school, it didn't ever matter. I will always owe him, And when you're talking about trauma bonding, right, or these kind of exploitative situations, a lot of times you see these situations, whether it's in domestic violence or in trafficking, where someone says, well, they pay my rent or they bought me some shoes. That doesn't give them the right to abuse you, And so just because someone did something for you doesn't mean they have the right to then turn around and hurt you, And that's really hard to process, And so fast forward my senior year of college, I was supposed to be team captain at that season, and coach came to me and he's like, hey man, anybody's a problem in this program, let me know right away. You're a team captain this year, and we want to clean up the program, because a lot of faith-based institutions, they'll recruit talent and they're not really worried about the character as much as they should be, and then there's problems, and they either get suspended or kicked out of school. At least during that era, that was a big problem, and we just want to clean up the program. And sure enough, there's some people that have problems, and I mentioned it to them, and nothing happened to me. And one of these individuals involved in some gang activity, and when I spoke up and nothing was done, he remained on the team, and we played this 4-game stretch in Southern California and Arizona one time, and we were in our hotel rooms and just kind of hanging out and goofing like guys do, kind of wrestling a little bit. And I had this guy kind of down a little bit or something, and people were laughing, taking pictures. Just maybe I hurt his pride, I'm not sure. But 3 days later, he comes back in my hotel room where we were at that point, and this was in the early 2000s, so when cell phones were roaming and stuff, and now it's roaming charges. And so he comes in, and he's like, man, let me borrow your cell phone. Let me borrow your cell phone. And I was like, no, man, you can't borrow my cell phone. I'm just sitting in my chair, my hotel chair, watching TV. Another teammate icing his knee on the other bed, and he walks around, and he starts to grab my throat, starts choking me, and telling me to tap out. And I hit the wall, and I lose consciousness, and he lets right back out. And I throw him on the bed, and I was going to hit him. I was like, man, forget this, It's like, just get out of my room. So I go straight to the coach's office, the hotel room, and I was like, Coach, this just happened. I warned you about this guy. Now he's choking me out in my room. Kick him off the team. And then he got upset at me. He said, I'm the coach. I make the decisions here. If you got a problem, you handle it. And so, where do you go from there? And it's either you forgive him, or what do you do? Or quit the team, or worse. And so my teammates are, the college basketball kind of culture, right? You got to be the tough guy and suck up whatever it is. They just told me, hey, just your choke marks, just put some stuff over it. We'll handle it internally. Don't talk about it. And then 3 days later in practice, same guy. It's a closed practice. There's no media, no nothing in there, just the coaching staff and us. And we're doing this drill where on offense, you're not allowed to put the ball on the ground, just a passing drill, so it makes it easier for the defense. So I'm locking him up, and this is not a basketball movement that they try to articulate, right? So he takes the ball like this, turns his elbows like this, and frog squats all the way down and drives through my face and ends up fracturing my jaw, pushing up my front two teeth. I didn't even know that was possible, to be hit hard enough on your jaw that your lower front two teeth can be pushed up. But it happened that day in practice, and chipped my back molar, which came out. And coach was standing behind it right when it happened with this whistle, and everybody just kind of like, like, holy crap, what just happened, right? And coach was just like, what are y'all staring at? Don't interrupt my practice. I was crawling off the floor like spitting blood, and I knew my season was over, maybe my career. And he just told his assistants, like, go take care of that, and like, don't interrupt my practice, And so I go, I spit out my water and my blood, and I put ice on my thing, and I sit on the sidelines. This was the first 15 minutes of practice when this happened. And like 30 minutes later, coach looks at me, he's like, you gonna finish practice or what? And so so I get back in there and finish practice, but I can't even talk. I'm so, and you just want to I finished practice. And we're supposed to be on the team bus at 3 a.m. the next morning for another road trip up to Oregon for another stretch of games. And so he's like, I'll see y'all at the team bus, 3 a.m. And, I go back to the dorm room. No staff asking me, hey, do you need medical? Like, do you need to go to the hospital? Do you need something? Nothing, just didn't even talk to me after practice. So I'm sitting in the dorm room with non-basketball friends. They're like, bro, you gotta go to the emergency room. Like, what are you doing, I'm just like, thinking I'm gonna be on the team bus at 3. And my teeth, like I said, they were pushed up, and so I couldn't talk. I hadn't drank water in hours because, I was at practice, and then I couldn't even drink water. I was trying to throw water down my face, and it would just drool out because you can't even swallow water at this point. So now you're dehydrated, haven't eaten in a while. And I couldn't even talk or articulate what's happened to me. So I'm just like this, and my mouth is all jacked up. And so this one of my friends was like, man, you're going to the hospital, and thankfully they convinced me at the end of the night to go to the hospital. Went to the hospital, waited 6 hours at the ER to be seen. And and then it was already past it. It was like 1 or 2 a.m. So she calls coach, like, Dan's not going to be on the team bus. And he's like, all right, whatever, basically, like, we didn't even really say much, and that was it. And what ended up happening, like, the team was gone for 4 days, never even got one phone call to see what happened to me. And if it wasn't for, at the ER, the doctors were just like, gave me pain meds, said, go to the dentist the next morning, you need to get your teeth filed down, because this is all bad, and you need the x-rays because you probably broke your jaw too. And so I went back to and I was like, I thought I didn't have insurance. I didn't know the university is supposed to cover that. I'm a student athlete. I didn't know those things. And so I didn't even want to go to that because I didn't have the money. I was poor. I didn't have family, nothing. And so I'm sitting in my dorm room with thankfully the door open like this. I came back from the hospital. It was like 4 or 5 in the morning. I had to wait till like 7 or 8 to call that like community clinic that he recommended, that the ER's like, this is for people that don't have money like you, that you can go to this community clinic and they can help you out. And so they, I tried calling them, and I couldn't get an appointment for another like 12, 14, 15 hours. Well, if I would have to wait that long, I literally would have gone without water for almost 30 hours, 36 hours. It would be critical. And no one really would have cared, And so thankfully another student just saw me sitting there all jacked up and like took me, just like, you're going to a dentist, like just took me to a dentist. And then, ended up having my teeth filed down twice. I had 4 root canals and a surgery. And it became this big thing at the university, academic versus athletic. And like, why is Dan being abused in this basketball program, And when I was gone, everybody knew I was on the team, and the team was gone. So they asked me, why aren't you with the team? And then, when they found out what happened, do you think it was on purpose? Yes, I think it was on purpose. And then, the athletic director pulled me into his office and chewed me out for 2 hours for telling people what happened, and said, I'm giving the program a bad name. Just be a Christian brother and keep your mouth shut, and you're giving the program a bad name. And didn't even deny what happened, just said, people don't know what to do with this information. And then the girl that brought me to the hospital actually went to the athletic director, was crying. I didn't ask her to do that. She was just like in tears about how they treated me. And then they pulled me back and said, like, you got to stop talking to people, And so at the end of the day, I just kind of stopped. Professors kicked me out of class because I'd be in the back of class with a cup that size, spitting blood in it, and it was like 3/4 full. because, attendance was part of my grade. So now I'm trying to graduate. I'm a senior now. I'm just trying to graduate. And they're like, get out of my classroom, take care of yourself, And so this was like really, and it's sad for me, I didn't really ever want to talk about that, but I feel like it's important, and I forgive the guy. I waited 20 years for an apology that never came. I graduated college 2004. Looking back, that's just not the leadership I was looking for, And so I didn't ruin my senior season. I really didn't play much after that, but then I went back to Germany. Still got a little bit of time, right? I went back to Germany after that to pursue my dream of playing professional basketball in the country I grew up in. And so now I have no stats. I have no film to show, really. I played at a small college. So the odds are like everything was stacked against me. I organized my own tryouts, traveled the country for 6 weeks, got no after no after no after no. Finally, get a yes, because someone else wanted too much money, and I made this team in Bremen, Germany, which is in the north and not too far from Hamburg, beautiful city. And before I signed my contract, I blew up my knee, and but you looking back, I was like, man, and that was kind of like ended a lot of it for me. But I was like, man, why did this happen? And teammates I'm still friends with to this day that I played with said, like, the first thing you said, like, when you blew up your knee was like, God, this ain't cool, because I was like, I just came, from all this injury my senior year at college, and it was a freak injury where someone just ran into my knee on accident, and my knee was out like this playing defense, and I'm a small guy, this guy's much bigger, and his knee came this way, and it turned my knee all the way around my leg was disfigured, and the trainer walked over and covered my eyes, and he was like, it's gonna be okay, breathe. Coach walks up with a cell phone, calling the manager, the owners, and he looks up and he's like, it's not okay. And I'm just like, ah. So, but, the last thing I remember was being in the ambulance and Coach being in the ambulance, and just like being in the ambulance with me, going to the hospital with me. What a contrast from the way I was treated my senior year of college, where this was a Christian university. This is just a normal professional basketball team. We had games to prepare for. It was more important. There was more at stake. I was the last guy to make that roster. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I'm just the guy that, just kind of squeezed in. So he could have just been like, he's 13 down the bench, So, but he stopped practice and he went in that ambulance, and I was like, that's leadership, So that really, like, looking back, it's like, well, maybe that's why that had to happen, and see that, that's how you should be treated when things happen like that. And so it was still a cool experience. I came back. I played in 3 professional games, like 48 seconds, 38 seconds, and a minute and 48. In the game I played a minute and 48, I took one shot, one three-pointer. The dude was guarding me, played University of Iowa, I think, like a big-time player, and I was on the bench the whole game. So he's talking mad trash, and like he gave me so much space. I was like, I'm touching this ball, I'm shooting it, I don't care, I'm taking my chances. And he was like, I was probably 10, 15 feet behind the three-point line. I like bust that thing, made it right in his face. And like everybody's so happy for me. And so I got the nickname Stats because I'm a 100% shooter for the career, 100%. 100% three-point, 100% field goal, And so that stat sheet is actually in the book. I found it. I was like, that has to be in there. The stat line says 100%. So, so it's a joke. I'm like the Rudy of German basketball, whatever, so I'll take it. And so I got the nickname Stats, and like my buddies I played with, they still call me that all these years later. So that's kind of that story, And so after that was kind of like a career-ending thing in a lot of ways. I kept trying to keep playing. Came back to the States, moved to Colorado with a friend of mine, and just had little odds and ends jobs and kept trying to get back into it, but it's just so hard when you have to pay the bills and stay alive, and you don't have family to go back to where you can just be like, oh, I'm gonna crash in the basement for a couple months and train and try to go back. You gotta work a bunch of jobs and feed yourself and train at the same time, and it just got too much. And in 2007 I had a chance to play in Canada. It was fun. Played 1 month in Canada on like a kind of somewhat of a professional tour team where we met for training camp in Edmonton for a week, and played for a month and traveled all the way west into Vancouver, and it was a beautiful time. It was a blessing. I got to do that, and that was really the last time I played in that sense. I just kind of tried. I was lost. It was like a grieving process for me. Like after basketball was gone in that sense for me, and just because you have another birthday doesn't mean things are going to get better. You grow up and like, oh, when I get this age or when I get that age, and things just kept going. I kept struggling with food insufficiency throughout, and years passed by. Now I'm 29 years old, living in San Jose, California. I was working at like a dry cleaning place, dry cleaning delivery place for Google, Yahoo, Facebook, all those big tech companies, and thought I was kind of starting to get somewhere. I was engaged to somebody, broke off the engagement, that didn't work out, lose my job, now I can't pay my rent again on time, and these Africans come to me, it's like, yo man, you can't pay your rent? Marry my cousin for a green card. 10 grand, and it's like amazing, like what you're willing to do when you're hungry. And exploitation, trafficking looks so many different ways, you never know what someone's going through just because they have a job, and you might see them at the gym, and you don't know, what might be going on behind closed doors. There's so many typologies of exploitation and trafficking, it looks so many different ways. And so, so they came to me and said, man, you don't want to be on the street, so you're going to marry my cousin. And, we'll give you $10,000, right? The elements of human trafficking, what force, fraud, and coercion, right? Subjecting one or more persons to, services, labor, or commercial sexual services. And if someone's under 18, force, fraud, coercion need not exist for it to be human trafficking. But, force, fraud, or coercion doesn't necessarily have to be all the elements all the time. So, so there's the, the coercion was, hey, you're going to be on the street, marry my cousin, Fraud is the false promises that always happen. 10 grand, you think I got 10 grand? So what am I gonna do, go to the police? They didn't pay me to marry her, so it's crazy thinking back, right? And like when you're victimized, when you're in those situations, and you're speaking to victims, they think this is their only option. Like, there's no other way out. That's why you're doing this, And from the outside, when your life is okay, it's hard to kind of relate to those things. And so they came to me with that proposal. In my mind, I was like, I'm just gonna tell them I'm gonna do it until I find another place to live. I'm just gonna lead them on, buy myself some time. And so I said that, but then they pushed it real fast. Next thing you know, I'm going on fake dates with her. Here's us at the movies. Look, we're at the beach. And we create this fake photo album. And God bless her. I mean, she was like a kind of a big time fashion designer from Ethiopia. She did big fashion shows, traveling in and out the country. Could have done it the right way, but it would have just been easier to be married to, me or whatever, for that. And so, and her family kind of pushed her to that too. I don't think it was necessarily her idea. Long story short, I ended up marrying her for like a sandwich at Santa Clara Courthouse, so we're like in the courthouse in Santa Clara, California, and like the person doing the wedding, and it's just me and a bunch of Africans. Like, I'm the only non-Ethiopian person in the room. Like, that's not suspicious. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on, And they're like, you may kiss the bride. I'm like, and they're all, I was like, oh my gosh, this just happened, And so I tell people all the time, like the name of that chapter is When You're Hungry, Nothing Else Matters, And there was a tagline on the back of a TARC bus over in San Jose with like a hungry kid. It was like a food bank ad, and it said, when you're hungry, nothing else matters. And that is be forever burnt in my brain, because it's so true. You do irrational things when your basic needs are not met. That's why when people live in poverty, the basic needs are not met. Generally, there's crime, there's frustration, like when, we justify things when we're in survival mode, right? It's kind of a human nature. And so, yeah, and I thought if I just burn the papers, it'll just go away, but it doesn't, so don't do it. And I was so I didn't tell my friends because I was embarrassed to always be the guy that needed help. Here I am. I played professional basketball for a year. I have 2 college degrees. I'm volunteering in church. I'm freaking trying, I'm working at the Olive Garden serving tables trying to survive. And, all this stuff happens to me. And, so you don't want people to know, And so this whole thing happened. Homeland Security flagged us. So, okay, right? So Homeland Security, HSI, now I do a lot of work with HSI. It's kind of funny. So, but HSI, brought us in for an interview in San Jose, to see if this is for love, So we we went in this interview, and the first interview is just like a normal room with office, and people have pictures on the wall and couches, like a comfortable office. And we sit down, they're like, so how'd you guys meet? How'd you guys fall in love? And I told myself, hey, I'm not gonna lie to my country. If they're gonna ask me straight up, they're gonna get a straight up answer from me. So I can, but she just took over. Oh yeah, I fell in love with him. Blah, blah. I was like, okay, girl, come on, boosting my confidence here, It's so funny. And they're like, oh well, that's great, guys. Well, congratulations, have a great marriage and stuff, and bye. I was like, well, this was easy, So I walked back out. Well, about a month later, I get another letter. They just set us up, and it was like some super aggressive letter. I don't remember what it said. I just remember how it made me feel, and it was really scared the heck out of me. And they said, well, basically you have to come back, and this time it's not going to be a friendly interview. That's pretty much clearly what I gathered from this letter. And so I call her up, and then in the interim, like, I'm just like a total mess, right? I just broke off an actual engagement. Now I'm married / relationship status complicated. I don't even know what's going on, right? And she's trying to kind of string me along, and like, I was like, are we starting to date now? Are we married? What the heck? So I call her, I was like, so we need to go back. This is an interrogation. Like, I need to know, like, are we like actually becoming friends now? Am I supposed to care? Are we supposed to, like, if we can figure this out? And she's like, no, I just want the papers. And I was like, all right, about to get some papers, all right, So we go back, and this time a totally different part of the building, the whole psychological thing, like, it's just cement blocks, no more pictures on the wall. Guards have a lot more guns all of a sudden, and you're like, it's just like they put me in this room. There's like a cement block with a light in my face. There's just a metal table and 2 federal agents and a camera. And they just like, boom, like straight up, interrogation, So the difference between an interview and interrogation, one is asking open-ended questions, the other one is accusatory. Second, an interview becomes accusatory, it becomes an interrogation, right? So that's kind of what that was. And they put us separate together, to find discrepancies. And this went on, hours, at least that's what it felt like. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. They put her finally in the room hours later, and that pulled me back in. And this is probably the scariest moment of my life. They turned off the cameras, turned off all the recordings and everything, and slid a piece of paper across the desk and said, this is off the record. And read this. And so I looked down, and it said, felony defrauding the U.S. government, $10,000 fine, all these different things, right? And they're like, look, you seem like a really nice guy that got caught in a bad situation. If you were part of an organized crime situation that coached you through this, you'd immediately be going away, but you just seem like you've been taken advantage of. And so if you just tell us the truth right now, we'll just make this go away and you'd be on your way. Or you can stick to your story, and this is what it is, And I was like, where do I sign? I told them the truth, and right then and there, and they could have just asked me straight up in the beginning, and I would have said something, but they always ask these roundabout questions and make your head spin. And so I told them the truth. I'm hungry, and this is what happened. And they offered me federal protection, and I should have taken it, but like, I just wanted to get the heck out of there. I never got more than a speeding ticket in my life. Now, how in the heck did I end up there? And they asked me twice, do you want federal protection? They don't tell you all the cool stuff they can do for you. I wish they did, because anything was better than my current situation. I just wanted to get out. I was like, I'm good. Even though I was still living with that family, and her uncle was my ride to the interrogation, who was waiting outside, and they're like, okay, we have to bring her in now and tell them what you just did. And who knows how they're going to react, right? So I was like, yeah, I'll be fine, right? So I walk out, and the uncle just looks me straight in the eye in this waiting room, and I'm just like, and they're like, his whole countenance just changed. I was like, oh, this is not good. I sit down, they bring her in, tell her everything, and as soon as we get in the car, man, they did like this like war cry thing, like la 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 la, like that for real. I was like, oh my God, the machete's coming out. They act like they didn't speak English anymore. Peeled out of the parking lot. Can I get that protection now? Late, So, and of course, sure enough, a couple days later, my car magically got smashed in, and they put something in my tank. My documents disappeared magically out of there, and so I got the memo. Of course, I needed a new living situation, and so from there, I met some undocumented Mexicans that basically saved my life. I love my boy Carlos. He helped me out, and a guy I worked with in some random jobs. Hey man, you can live with us, and the Hispanic family just loved me to death. They didn't barely making $8-9 an hour, but share all their food and just like a different kind of culture, right? And just what I needed at the time, and they really helped me put some more meat on my bones and stuff, because I was really like sickishly like not I wasn't eating enough and stuff, and so that was really helpful. And from there, I came to this part of the country, randomly for a job actually at a small church in New Albany, Indiana. I didn't even know that existed. Like a lot more happened in a room, but like that was my next station. And I was at that church for 1.5 years and realized there's a lot of kids falling through the cracks right here that the church isn't reaching. So I resigned and had $50 in my pocket and started my nonprofit called Redeem the Dream. And I remember opening a bank account at Chase Bank with $50 in my pocket, and they said, well, it's going to cost you $10 a month to keep this thing going. I said, well, it gives me 4 months to make it happen. And 6 years, raised a little over $250,000 for kids in this area, and never look back. It was amazing run. Just so much awesome stuff happened. That's why the book is named after the nonprofit. And the whole idea behind Redeem the Dream for me was like, if I can help, because always ask yourself, why me, why me, why me? Why is all this stuff happening to me? And the answer really is to take the eyes off yourself and focus on other people and start serving. And when you start serving, you start healing. And so I felt like, my basketball career was cut short. Like, life was rough. My father abandoned me. I didn't even tell that story, but it's in there too. I met him a couple times, watched him OD on drugs and stuff like that. And so, like, there's that whole thing. If I can help as many other people accomplish their dreams, I'm redeeming my own dream. And that was kind of my idea and vision behind it. And just got a lot of people on board. It was an amazing run. Did it 6 years full time. And after 6 years, I just couldn't feed my family anymore. Like, I didn't actually got married for real, been married almost 13 years, 4 kids. Yeah, like 1, 5, 7, and 9. Crazy. My wife's from the Philippines, who's also a survivor of human trafficking. And in her story, I put a little bit in there, but she was locked in a house in Manila for 10 months, and like the worst that you can imagine happened to her. And then through a mail order bride kind of situation, coming to the U.S. and was married to a guy much older than her for 7 years in West Palm Beach. One day he walked a dog, got run over by a car. Dog survived, he didn't. And we met a couple months after that. So yeah, dated 14 months, got married, been married to 13 years. So there's a lot of cultures going on in our house: Filipino, German, English. I think our kids are really confused, but we make it work. So it's been good, yeah. And then after, like, I just couldn't like pay the bills anymore, because it was as nonprofit gets. I was proud to raise $250,000, but hardly any of that went to me. My first paycheck was $700, for a month, and then it just kind of went from there. But it's just like I gave all my 30s, serving the community and the kids in this way. I had like nothing to show for it, and I was like, whoa, that's rough. So it was another kind of a little bit of a low point when that whole thing tanked, and but in a sense of just the money was around the table, but sometimes boards can be difficult, and everybody has different intentions sometimes, but and that's how I ended up at LMPD. I was like, hey, how can I keep going? So been at LMPD for the last 5 years. Just really passionate about identifying exploitation and helping as much as I can. So I've been speaking, and got to speak at a big human trafficking conference last year in Clearwater, Florida, National Association of Human Trafficking Investigators, and actually do a 90-minute session on my story and break down elements of exploitation and stuff, and it was really cool. And so just whenever I just do what I can with what I have. I don't have a position or anything that's special. I just I'm passionate about it. On March 6th, I'm doing a 2-hour thing at the mayor's office. Invited me to do a 2-hour presentation on illicit massage businesses in Louisville. It's kind of been like something I've been hitting really hard. We don't really have a lot, that's being done, and I shut down 2 in the last couple months on my own, just in different ways. And so I'm always looking for ways to do what I can with what I have. And so that's kind of it, man. I talked for a good 45 minutes. I hope I didn't bore you guys, but so that's really kind of the book and everything. And does anybody have any questions? So I know. Sorry. Yeah.
Do you have your books for sale?
Yeah. I brought some books, and I even have like a little square thing if you want to pay a card or whatever. So but that's pretty much the book is the story, and everybody said you got to write, and so it's 275 pages, and it's got a bunch of pictures in the middle and stuff, and so yeah.
What unit are you in with LMPD or?
I'm a division resource officer now in the 6th
Okay.
Division, so I do quality of life things, and I try my best to articulate exploitation as a quality of life issue when they let me. And so, but it's mainly dealing with community stuff. I just did like coffee with a cop at a Kroger before I came here. Serving coffee, people are loving it at 12 degrees outside, so and raising money, doing community events, and city council, all the homeless camps in the area. I deal with the homeless and trespass issues, or just any complaints people have. I'm like your personal police officer. People call me, email me, and parking complaints, anything like that. So yeah, that's kind of what I do now on the 6th, and try to be nice and smile as much as I can. Yeah, it always worked best for me. So, but yeah.
What is your future plans? Do you have anything in the future that you're wanting to try to achieve and?
I mean,
what
I
you're doing
really
now,
like,
or-
yeah, I mean, I really like, my ultimate goal in law enforcement was, doing trafficking and stuff, and I've traveled the country and even outside the country, a lot of it on my own time and dime. Went through like 12 or so different trainings, and I really would like to have an opportunity, a lot easier said than done, and, there's some things I can't talk about here, but but yeah, it's very, very challenging, and it's a very interesting space nationwide too. It's like, it's very challenging. It's just, and it's hard to get buy-in and get support, really, because a lot of the victims, they don't self-identify, and they're just people nobody cares about, to be honest. We all say we do, but we don't really, so and it's and a lot of times that's why I'm so fascinated with the spa model, because the victims are middle-aged women from Asia, and like they're the perfect victims, because there's no outcry about a 40-year-old woman from China, so but they're also human beings, so and it's a very, they exploit them in so many different ways, from tax fraud to marriage fraud to cheating on life insurance to creating kids that don't exist and writing them off on their taxes. I mean, they find every which way. It's a $5 billion industry in the U.S. It doubled in the last 5 years. We have 19,000 illicit massage businesses in the country now. New York and California, New York and LA has more things like that than they do coffee shops. And so it's a business model that's really worked well for organized crime, and it's, you got to get creative. But I've studied it for years, and trying to find the support and the authority to do what needs to be done, and so that's really what I want to do. And I love to speak and write. I would love to continue to speak and write and tell my story. I always tell people all I have is my story, because I mean I didn't focus on making money in my 30s and stuff. I focused on serving the kids that I felt like needed it and stuff. But I always feel like, well, I have this story that maybe God could use, or maybe that can make a difference in someone's life. So that's why I wrote, and I just want to tell my story, and maybe it helps somebody. So writing, speaking, and fighting exploitation any way I can. That's why I may never get an opportunity as far as a position, and but
Well,
I do what I can with what I have.
Yeah.
That's always, somebody, a wise person once said, do the work and the rest will just kind of come. So I try to do the work. Yeah. Let's see.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Extremely interesting.
Yeah, very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Probably could have listened to you for 2 more hours.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are
thank
you on the Kentucky Human Trafficking Task Force?
Yeah, I'm on the statewide one. I actually just was asked to start one here in Jefferson County, so I started. We met twice on Zoom and trying to put together a little team here,
Yeah.
like a multidisciplinary team. So we have a good group, and I think I kind of have like kind of a vision as far as like what can be done. Like the Kentucky Statewide Human Trafficking Task Force got like 100+ people or so.
Right.
So it's more like an information sharing thing, whereas we have here kind of keep it a small group and have like some tasks that need to be done.
Yeah.
There's a lot of legislation that needs to change. I mean, one, sex buying needs to be a felony, because it's not. And so that will drive the demand down just a little bit. People that are addicted are going to continue, but the ones that are like kind of on the fence are like, oh, I don't want to lose my license as an attorney or as a doctor or as a nurse or whatever I'm doing, which if you get convicted of a felony, then you can lose your career and things. So that would just kind of give more of an appropriate consequence. And then with these IMBs, we need a statewide establishment license, which we don't have in Kentucky. You're supposed to have a massage license, but the establishment as a state, we need an establishment license. We need a requirement for an intake form. Georgia does a really good job and has that. So we're like, when you come into a legitimate massage place, they're supposed to like do like a medical questionnaire first, And so like all these little things that would help shut those places down, and also as a city, we just need to not give out business licenses to businesses that are these types of businesses without them first at least showing a massage license or of the people that are going to be performing the massages. And I mean, there's so much fraud.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And like the Asian culture, they're very good at memorization. And so like there's this federal exam called the MBLEX that every massage person needs to take to pass. And once they pass that, they apply with their state for a state license. And so this MBLEX, you can only take it in English, in some cases in Spanish, that is it. And so you have these Asian women, they don't speak a word of English, and they have a license. I noticed in some places, you got a license? And I look back, yep, they got a license. And then I started like meeting with the attorneys that kind of manage those I had some long conversations with the attorneys that manage the exam and own this exam, and like, how does this happen? You can only take it in English, and people don't speak a word of English, all of a sudden end up with a license, you know, and once they get that license, it's really hard to take it away. So what they do is like they have these testing centers around the country, right? And they would send people in there to memorize questions. And so like your job would be just to memorize 3 or 4 questions. So they have a base of like 500 questions for a 100 multiple choice test. And so they would go in and memorize 3 or 4 questions. Well, if you have hundreds, if not more, people memorizing 1 or 2 questions and then get the answers. And so they have this pool. And so when they bring these foreign victims in, then they literally sit them down for 6 to 8 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks, and make them memorize based on keywords how to pass a test in a language they don't speak.
Wow, that's crazy.
And so then they go in, they don't speak a lick of English, and they pass that test based on keywords that they're drilled like for 4 to 6 weeks, like all day. They study those keywords and they coach them on how to pass it. And so they try to kind of negate that. When someone has a really low score, that's a red flag of someone that's just there to memorize a couple, you know, and they try to, you know, and then there's transcript fraud, because this is another thing that needs to change as far as legislation, is like the State Department of Education will just put a blessing on someone's school, say you can be a school. We have these people that are just, they're not necessarily educated, they don't even have a graduate degree or even a bachelor's degree, can open their own school, massage school, for example, and now they're a massage school, like with the blessing of the State Department, and they're like diploma mills where they're selling transcripts. So they have these people that buy transcripts for like $2,600, you know, so it's like, give me a piece of paper that says so-and-so just took 600 hours of your schooling for $2,600. Well, a struggling small business, you know, they might actually teach massage legitimately, but they're struggling financially. They might sell a couple for like $2,500 a pop, you know, and then yeah. So they buy the transcripts, and then even with the schooling, they can cheat on it because there's no, you don't really have to necessarily like speak English to sit in class. You can sit in class and not understand a word, you know. So there's so much that needs to change because there's not enough regulation. I can go and talk about that forever. I'm talking to the mayor's office about that on March 6th for 2 hours, and hopefully we can move forward with some things, you know, to really make this Jefferson County like an environment where these people don't want to do their business, you know, because once these victims come in, you can't really help them. You have to prevent them from coming in because the coercion is so strong back home where there's threats on their family, so they'll never talk, and bad stuff will happen to their family in China and Korea, you know. And so once they're here, it's really hard. You have to like catch them before they bring them here, you know, and make it a little bit more difficult to come in, because generally people would just either walk across the southern border, you know, they fly in and walk across, or they just show up at an airport and say, I'm a Christian seeking asylum. And I went to a training in Springfield, Illinois about this like last month, and they said the last time he checked, it was up to 20 years when for your court date for asylum, because they're so behind. So you fly in, your court date is in 24 years, ma'am. They're gone. You do not know where they're at, what's going to happen. And they're just like moved around. You know, you can buy a franchise for 30 to 50 grand. And then there's like a regional manager type again that supplies the women. They either all come from Flushing, New York, or Monterey Park, California. The Mississippi is kind of the divide. And so they stay on their sides. And they're just extremely organized. Like I said, it's a $5 billion industry. They have a lot of attorneys. They're smart. They're not dumb. They'll purposely pose as these little like mom and pop strip mall spots where you think, oh, this is just some shaky little thing. You don't realize how much money goes through there, you know. And a lot of times the people that pick up the money, they pick it up in cash, and you'll see like people with New York license plates and nice SUVs parked in front of those places. They're probably picking up some money and driving it back because they just want to pick up the cash and drive it back. So, yeah, so there's just a lot going on, you know. And then, you know, they get married off to American men, that kind of part of the deal, so that way they get like their status, and so they're exploited and they owe sexual favors to their husband, and then they go to work and they owe sexual favors to whoever client. And then there's so much shame culturally to say you're a sex worker that they would never tell their family back home because they were lied to about what they're really going to do here. And so it just goes and goes and goes, you know. And then hurt people, like the only way for them out is to become a manager. And a lot of times then once they've been exploited enough, then they become like the manager, like the mama san that make sure the other girls do all that stuff, because that's the only job left for them to do here until they retire or die or whatever. So it's really, you know, it would take a lot of courage for them to step out and speak out, because someone else in the family is gonna, you know. So it's they have a strong psychological hold, you know, and law enforcement's tried so much, from like these sting operations, and they open up the next week, and you know, and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of law enforcement money to take one down, and then a week later you see them open up under a different name, you know, and people are like, oh, forget it, you know. That's why it just grows so fast, you know. And the Chinese really have a big hold on it, you know, the Chinese and the Koreans. We have a lot of Koreans in Louisville and Chinese, and I've seen some really, really terrible things in some of these places. You know, I just go in. I'm just like a unit of one. I just kind of go in, and sometimes, you know, and try to help. You know, you always try. You always offer the help, but they'll, you know, you ask them, where's your passport? Well, it's in New York. You know, like, how'd you hear about this job? Well, I met some guy in South Korea at a coffee shop, and next thing you know, you're prostituting in Louisville. You think that's normal? You know, something probably happened. You know, so it's crazy, you know, but it's just people that no one really thinks about or cares about too much, and everybody has their problems, and we have so many challenges in Louisville with, you know, the violent crime, the homicides, and the, you know, and they're all valid, you know. It's just allocation of resources. So I'm not blaming and shaming anyone from leadership, for, you know, everybody kind of has their own priorities, but, you know, to me, I have such a lived experience with exploitation and falling through the cracks that I really want to seek that out and just kind of do my part, you know. So, but that's kind of where that's at. So, but,
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks for listening. I really
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You better get a copy.
Oh, for sure. I appreciate it.
So, I mean, do we need the card to do the